There's been a lot of criticism, and maybe it's a reaction to an over-reliance upon, an over-focus on hell as we share Christ with our friends. So, kind of the gospel presentations that say, but you better accept Jesus. What if you died tonight? So that was kind of, maybe 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s. That was a very popular way to share the gospel. And I think there's been a reaction against that, which says we don't want people to come because of fear. We don't want to scare them into heaven. We don't even really want to talk about those negative things. How do we talk about hell as we proclaim Christ with our friends and as we think about our own discipleship?
It's a very good question. I told you before, I did public penance and talked about heaven and hell in preaching and teaching and writing because I saw I had neglected it so. And I read pastor after pastor, professor after professor had said the same thing. So maybe there are people who did what you said in evangelism. I know there were pastors who preached hellfire and brimstone too much, okay? I know that was true. But no, I don't think even in the past so many decades has that been the case, because I see person after person, even from reading some of the books that Morgan and I have written and edited, co-edited, repenting that they haven't talked about it at all or hardly at all. But your question is good. In personal evangelism, what place should hell have? I would first of all say a little place. That is, we need to tell our story. And here's how I like to do it. That is, why not use the first person and talk about what we deserve? Because it's absolutely true. If we don't do that, no matter what we say, we come across as holier than thou, as talking down, as the way unsaved people see Christians. We're the self-righteous ones, and we're condemning those pagans for their terrible sins and whatever. Well, actually, we were unsaved. We deserve God's wrath. So to say that implies already the other person is in trouble. So, use the first person. Talk about what we deserve. And it's true. Good grief, it is absolutely true. So in that regard, we should never forget hell, because it tells us of God's love for us. We didn't even talk about this, but the church has historically taught and correctly taught that in the cross, Christ suffered the pains of hell. As a matter of fact, after being involved writing my first book on hell, two things really hit me hard. One is that how much Jesus loved us, because he suffered, and this is mysterious too. It's a corollary of his incarnation, of his being God and man in one person. Because the question comes, how could the Son of God in 3 hours on the cross suffer the true equivalent of eternal conscious punishment? That's outrageous. How can that work? Already St. Anselm around the year 1000 had good ideas about this. The divine arithmetic, all right, is something like this. An infinite, finite person can suffer the true equivalent of infinite punishment in a finite period of time. In other words, the dignity of Christ's person, his deity, enables him truly to suffer the equivalent of eternal punishment forever and accomplish what Hebrews 9 calls an eternal redemption. The alternative is he would still be on the cross. Galatians 3, he would be an eternal curse, and we would all be damned. So God makes a twofold substitution. Christ dies in the place of his people. Christ dies in the place of whosoever would believe. But God also truly substitutes his limited suffering for eternal suffering. Now, the key is his limited suffering, which makes it unlimited in another sense. The pains of hell historically have been both what we call poena damni and poena sensus. Poena damni is the punishment of the damned, separation from the bliss and fellowship of God. And that's exactly what Jesus suffered. When he cried out in the cross in the cry of dereliction, my God, if I say it right, I weep, so I don't say it right. But it was a shriek, my God, why have you abandoned me, forsaken me, deserted me, the word means. We can't even, that doesn't compute. We can't understand that. The eternal fellowship of the Father and the Son was broken in order that we might be saved. The other thing is poena sensus, the punishment of sense, the active suffering of pain in body and soul. And the Son of God suffered that. That's why he asked for 3 times for the cup to be removed in Matthew 26. And in effect, the Father said each time, no. It was necessary for the Son of God to drink the cup of God's wrath. That's the Old Testament background, cup of God's wrath, Jeremiah 25 and other places. And he did drink it to the dregs, to the bottom for us sinners. So, in a limited period of time, thank God, otherwise Jesus would still be on the cross. He'd be eternally accursed, and we would never be saved. So God marvelously has him suffer in a finite period of time, the true equivalent of eternal punishment, breaking the fellowship in the Father and the Son. That's just unfathomable to us. And suffering the true equivalent of eternal punishment in body and soul, that we might be saved.